Whispers of Wisdom, where we journey together through ancient wisdom and hidden practices, seeking what lies beyond. Okay, so you said flight, fight, and freeze. And that we said is trauma. And
your body goes into these three responses when it has had a traumatic experience. So that's when you can call it a trauma.
okay.
Unless your body has gone into these experiences, you can't label it as trauma. That's why there's no definition as such. Like, for example, a car accident happens to me and I'm perfectly fine the next day. I'm back on the wheel, I'm back out.
Yeah.
Because I haven't perceived that as trauma.
Right.
For the exact same incident for you, you'd probably never touch the wheels of a car again.
Got it. So my trauma can be
Completely different. So it's perception of an incident that has impacted you and thrown you into a stress response.
Got it. So it need not necessarily be something really huge. It's as simple as, I remember when I was in 4th standard, for half a day, my friends pretended I am invisible. Oh my God, the heartbreak I had for that. And I think even in my adulthood, that's what, like, sometimes I want to be seen. I want to be seen.
Yeah.
And this recently I unpacked for myself.
Yeah.
And if I tell this to anybody else, they're like, don't be silly. What, one day, half a day, you all played that you were invisible. Now, why are you saying it's trauma? But it can be my trauma. Right?
It can most certainly be. And in fact, through somatic therapy, we feel that most of the biggest trauma responses in your life actually stem from the most trivial, tiny thing from your childhood, which as an adult, you'd be like, really? Like, seriously? Like, something as big as abandonment issues could come from the fact that this person stole an eraser from me and he left me abandoned to take the blame for it.
Yeah.
It can be as silly as that.
Wow.
But as an adult, you grow up with these abandonment issues, wondering, where did I get it from? I had a present mother, I had a present father, where, this is where it came from.
And I also feel like children a lot of times are unpacking it on their parents.
Yeah.
Right? You created so much trauma in my life.
Correct.
And I'm so wounded because of you.
Correct.
So now I want to get into the topic of wounded masculine and wounded feminine. These are also words that, lately we see a lot and hear a lot around it. So if you can just help me understand, how does a wounded... So a person has both feminine and masculine inside. Is that my understanding correct?
Correct.
So even in a woman, her wounded masculine can show up.
100%.
How does it? How does a wounded masculine look in a woman?
Okay, so let's unpack this, right? Like, you've thrown a big bomb my way. So let's unpack this one. So firstly, yes, for lack of better words, because I know that a lot of people will be triggered by this line of conversation.
Really? Okay. Why some?
Yeah, because they're like, oh, how can you say that these attributes are feminine and these attributes are masculine, and, the whole debate. So for lack of better words, we're using the word feminine and masculine. It's essentially yin and yang energy, polar energies, opposing energies. And we all have that within us. If you see Indian classical traditional cultural roots, we say the Ida Nadi, the Pingala Nadi, the Surya Nadi, the Chandra Nadi, right? So what are we meaning by this? We are saying a part of us that is responsible for action, and then there's a part of us that's responsible for more inwards feelings and reflections, all of that, right? Similarly, for lack of better words, lack of words in the dictionary, we're going to use the word feminine and masculine here.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So when we look at attributes of the feminine is responsible for intuition, for flow, right? It's also responsible for softness, for nourishing. Yet there's also a fierce element of chaos there.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at an archetype like Kali, she represents free flow, like chaos. Right? When you look at the masculine element, it represents that of structure, creating structure for the flow to come in. It's also responsible for taking actions, like once an idea has come from the feminine, the masculine is going to put that into action and make sure that it manifests into reality. It's also responsible for protection. It's also responsible for providing for the raw materials for the feminine to thrive. This exists within all of us. This is the broad sort of play of masculine.
So in a way, we are also complete within ourselves.
We're also 100% complete.
Okay.
Right? So this is the feminine and masculine archetypes that we hold within us. But there is wounding, right, in both the parties, thanks to colonization, patriarchy, put everything in a mix. We have a big mumbo jumbo of things.
Yeah.
So let's look at what is then wounded feminine and wounded masculine and how that shows up. The wounded feminine shows attributes of deep insecurity.
The wounded feminine.
Yes. Insecure about her flow, unsure of her flow, indecisiveness, right? It's also manipulation is a key aspect of the wounded feminine. Manipulating things as a power structure. This is all coming from the feminine. Whereas a wounded masculine is more aggressive, loud, wanting to take up space, all of the attention, right? That's how insecurity shows up here, right? Both have insecurities, but when the masculine is showing insecurities, usually tries to overpower everybody in the room by being the loudest, by showing brute force.
Right.
So now you can see if you're in wounded masculine or feminine, when you see a woman in her brute force, needing to be the last one to put a word in, being the loudest, she is in a wounded masculine archetype that needs healing. Like, what am I feeling insecure about that I'm having to be this loud and this overpowering? Because the healed masculine uses silence as strength.
The healed masculine uses silence as strength.
That his presence is enough. He doesn't have to speak anything. His presence is enough for the feminine to flow. Like I said, creating the structure for the feminine to flow. He doesn't have to establish a power here. He's in complete service to her and she is in flow.
Imagine there's no threat in such a relationship.
There isn't. The wounded feminine, like if you see a man trying to play the victim card, a man trying to manipulate the situation emotionally for his advantage, then you'd say he's in wounded feminine archetype. And you'll see this a lot in women power play structures. And it makes sense why it existed, right? For the last several centuries, we've been in a patriarchal society where there are several households where women have had to depend on men for all kinds of security reasons. Then how do you establish a power center there? Only through emotions, because that's the only game they know to play. I'm not villainizing them, but that's all they know how to grab onto power. So if I can emotionally manipulate my man into feeling bad for me, feeling like I'm a victim that he needs to take care of, that's where all the Cinderella stories come from, right? Damsel in distress.
And also the wife jokes.
So it's all coming from that, needing to establish that power structure. But if you look at our ancient wisdom, it's very clear. There is no power structure. It's like, I can't exist without you. It's the same within our body. The masculine cannot exist without the feminine. It's imbalanced. You can't live a fulfilling, thriving life without the essence of the masculine and the feminine.
Beautiful.
And when, let's say, two wholes come together in a relationship, they form infinity. It's like two circles continuously synergistic with each other, that sometimes I'm the masculine, sometimes you're the masculine.
And that's okay for us to flow if my femininity will flow into masculinity and his masculinity into my femininity, and that's okay. But also, like I feel in many modern relationships, it's always the seeking of completing the part that I can't access.
That's unfortunate, right? Like, why do you believe that you are not complete already? You need to first, then it's a very transactional relationship. That I'm incomplete and I'm coming to extract something from you. It's not that I am full, so I have so much fullness to give that I'm ready to give on to you. And ready to take from you. So that's when synergy is established. Otherwise, it's extractive. You're extracting something from me.
Right.
I'm extracting something from you.
So I'm sure a lot of audience are thinking, I am full, complete and perfect, but I have found somebody who's not full and complete and perfect. So I'm always giving. So I'm sure they have a lot to unpack as well.
Yes. If you're the only giver in the relationship won't run very long, because you don't have, unless you are in constant practice of something. But even then, there's a point where you will be exhausted. And when that exhaustion sets in, resentment sets in. And that's when you're like, I don't want to give anymore. And then you'll be labeled as the rebel, saying, you've always given for so long, like, why are you stopping now? And then it creates a conflict. And then there is like, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
So why go through that cycle?
100%. So is there a possibility that we can move from the archetypes of just being wounded masculine, wounded feminine to divine masculine and divine feminine? How does those qualities look?
I think we've been so lucky, right? We don't have to break our heads around these things. We've been given such a beautiful structure in our scriptures of sadhana practices. And more often than not, any sadhana practice will reveal these truths to you of what is missing in you and what you need to work on.
Yeah.
And it takes you on that path of fulfillment.
Yeah.
That if you have a father wound, you'll see the divine show up as your father and fill that wound. If you have a mother wound, the divine will show up as a mother and fill that wound. If there's a controlling issue that's coming up, the divine will beat you down to, let go of that control and flow.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so much that you're learning without having to actually read a book and learn.
So what I'm also hearing is sadhana is not just experiencing something magical, miraculous, or some kind of alchemy, but it's actually coming in touch with your own self and filling those
Your
spaces
whole
of
self.
hollow. Whole self.
Sadhana is what? Practice. Right? It's a practice that I show up every single day, not for something esoteric, but for myself.
Yeah.
It's to come and face myself. To everything that you seek and see through sadhana is a reflection of you. So if there's something that you're seeing that you're not liking, it is something you don't like in yourself that you need to work on accepting.
100%. To our audience, I just want to make a point that whenever anybody speaks about sadhana, this is nothing esoteric. It is showing up for yourself. Because a lot of time there is this real misunderstanding, oh, big sadhaki, oh, doing sadhana, you must be really out of bounds,
Yeah.
You must be considering yourself really offbeat.
Yeah.
And people feel that. It's just simply, I think it's one of the hardest things to do, to show up to yourself.
Yeah.
You can do everything else. You can be lazy and say, I'm not doing this today. I won't go to the gym. I won't do yoga today. I'll go have a cup of coffee. But if you can say no to all of that and still show up to your sadhana,
Yeah.
then you're doing something much harder than what it could be.
I think there's so much pressure put on this word sadhana also, right? Anything can be your sadhana practice. Even showing up on a yoga mat at 6 a.m. in the morning could be your sadhana.
Yes.
Or it could be to take your drawing book every day at 4 p.m., sit and sketch. That could be your sadhana practice. Anything that you show up for, whether... And also, people think that when it's sadhana, you show up in your 100% every day. No, that doesn't happen. We are humans at the end of the day. We are not some super cosmic spirit. We are, but we're still in this human reality. Everything in the human reality binds us and bothers us. So there could be a day when you're showing up 10%. There could be a day when you're showing 110%. And there could be a day when you're showing 0%. But you show up.
You still show up.
You still show up.
And that's
And let divinity fill the rest of it.
Wow.
Right?
That comes with a lot of surrender, Anusha, I feel.
It does. But also the word surrender, I feel like, is so misunderstood.
Yeah.
And many people talk about it without understanding what it is. Doesn't mean that if I say I'm surrendering right now, suddenly everything just flips and there's like a magic switch that goes in my head.
Yeah.
No, surrender means that it's hard, but I show up.
Yeah.
Every minute of it is excruciatingly painful, but I trust the process.
I trust the process. Yeah.
I don't trust that there's some divinity that's helping me, but I trust the process. I trust myself to get myself through this. And through that process, you learn that there's something bigger at play and there's like divinity is contributing to it, and everything that's happening, including your struggle,
Right.
was meant to get you exactly where you need to be.
Wow. So in other words, everyone is in a place where they need to be at this moment, and it is the right place.
Precisely.
And we could not have changed that or altered that. Or can we fuel it?
You can. You can fuel it. I mean, there are many people who accept that this is all there is and there's going to be zero effort from my side because what's the point of it all?
Yeah.
Right? This should in no way contribute to that. I'm co-creating with life. I'm not saying life happened to me.
Wow.
I'm co-creating life with the cosmos, with Devi, with divinity in whatever form you see it. For some people, nature is divinity. For some people, the universe is divinity. For some people, it could be a god or goddess that is divinity. So however you see divinity, you're co-creating life with divinity. So co-creating doesn't mean you'll just sit back and say, okay, life, give it to me. It's saying this is what I want, be my partner in this. We'll figure it out together.
So according to you, you're saying God can show up in any forms, whatever is easy for your perception. And that can be nature, that can be Devi, that can be Shiva, that can be Jesus, that can be your art, that can be your
100%. It could be your own mom also.
Can be your own mom. Anusha, you were also a lecturer of biology. Yeah, you taught biology in a very popular college in Bangalore for a couple of years, right?
Yes.
Do you see a deliberate design in the human body?
I see a lot of wisdom in the human body. I see a lot of evolution in the human body, a lot of magic in a human body.
What kind of magic?
There's so much that's fascinating that doesn't make sense, right? Like we know that our neurons are firing electricity. We're not plugged to a source.
Yeah.
Where is that coming from?
Are they firing electricity?
Yes.
Okay.
It is firing electricity. It's like an electrical system that has
Right.
insulation and all of that. It is firing in terms of neurochemicals basically, which is similar to that of electrical firing. There's also electrical firing in your heart that's happening to keep a constant beat of the heart. So it's basically internal drum beats that nobody is monitoring. Where is that coming from? So all of this is fascinating. It's so magical, but it's so everyday that we don't even stop to think that, my God, I have magic here happening and unfolding in every millisecond of my existence.
Wow. So if I have to tap into that body wisdom, what are some of my practices? What should I, can I do one or two things that I can become more aligned with my body?
Yeah, most certainly.
There's also a lot of talk around moon cycles. Yeah. And even the Western world is now talking so much about the phases of the moon, how the body is impacted, how the mind is impacted, and especially for women as well. Right? I want you to throw some light around the moon phases and the moon cycle and how it impacts us and the body.
This is beautiful. I mean, I could talk about the moon and the body for I think eons. There's so much correlation between the two, right? Like if you look at ancient Earth, ancient human civilizations, we didn't have artificial light around us. Our cycles in our body were synced to the rhythms of nature, including seasons of nature, because we ate seasonal produce. We were exposed to seasonal lighting, which means there were certain parts of the year which had more sunlight and less moonshine, certain parts of the year that had more moon, less sun intensity, right? So it was believed that because of this kind of moon exposure to our body, our bodies, women's bodies would sync the period cycle with the moon cycle. So you'd essentially bleed either during the full moon or the new moon.
Yeah. And they said then your body's in alignment.
Your body is in alignment with the rhythm of nature, that you're in sync with the rhythm of nature. Right? And it was also believed that because of this loosely, I mean, it has many correlations, right? Because of this, if you notice around, so if let's say you're bleeding around the full moon, binding up to the full moon is when you'll start experiencing PMS. You become more sensitive, you become more, irritable in some sense. So people who experience, let's say, PMS more intensely, that a small thing can make you fly into rage and things like that. The whole word lunatic came from there. Because around the full moon, you start acting crazy. But where is it actually coming from? It's essentially PMS, that you're synced with the moon. Around the full moon is when you get your bleed. And around that time, you're extra sensitive also to energies and things like that. So you see how it's kind of all lost in today's day and age because of artificial light exposure. Your body doesn't go into that kind of connection unless you're in deep spiritual practice. Right? If you look at Sri Vidya, path of Sri Vidya that follows the Tithi Nitya path, where each day of the moon is considered as a Devi.
Devi, yes.
And you're surrendering to each phase of the moon as the Devi.
And they have qualities.
And they have their own qualities. And very similar syncing qualities with your cycles as well. There are days when you're more energetic. There are days when you're in reflection. There are days when you're creative. There are days when you are, destructive. Even the moon cycle is created exactly like that with the Devi. And it's sort of a sideways approach. All spiritual practices, I feel, is a sideways approach. So it's like you're practicing it and you're already there and you're like, wow, okay, it was that simple. You don't need to logically think about it, rationally dissect it and things like that. As you practice it, the practice itself teaches you so much. Right? So just by practicing this, you understand that I am a whole, irrespective of what phase of life I am in. whether I'm in my creator phase or whether I'm in my destructive phase or my reflective phase,
Yeah.
I'm still complete.
So one thing is the person who is experiencing these cycles within herself. Let's take, for example, a woman. Sometimes even she is not aware of it.
Yeah.
Forget the partner. Yeah. And then there is this friction
Yes.
during the PMS time. You're too sensitive. Oh, you've gone mad. You're crazy.
Yes.
Control yourself.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Don't unleash yourself on me. Yeah. So how do we bring more awareness to men as well?
I mean, one of the best ways to bring awareness is to understand that, in today's world, we're fighting so much for equality, right? How do you fight for equality when you are polar opposites? When your bodies work so differently, then what is the equality that you're fighting for? Fighting for equal opportunities is one thing, but fighting for women to become better men, I find that to be illogical.
Yeah. And that's what's happening in corporate space.
That's precisely, yes, what's happening. Because if you look at, and this is coming from science, right? This is not spirituality.